Okay, so in terms of calculating inflation, deflation, if you understood the last podcast well about compound interest, you should have no problem with inflation and deflation. Inflation is defined as the steady rise in prices and then consequently the fall in the quantity of goods that the same amount of money can buy. So as inflation occurs, things start to cost more, the same things start to cost more, so we can't buy as many of them. We can calculate inflation using the compound interest formula and therefore the finance app on our graphing calculator. So it says in 1990 the average price of a barrel of oil was $23.19. If the price of inflation occurred at an average rate of 3% after 1990, what would a barrel of oil have cost in 2010? So we are actually going to do this on our graphing calculator. Okay, so in order to do this on our graphing calculator, we're going to open our finance package. $23.19 is the price in 1990, so that would be what we would call the present value. Don't forget to make it a negative. So $23.19. If the price of inflation occurred at an average rate of 3%, so my percentage is 3. Compounding periods per year is going to be 1, okay? And the number of years, well, from 1990 to 2010 is 20 years. We want to know what the price of the barrel would be in 2010, so that's my future value. Okay, so I'm going to press alpha solve, and it tells me that now a barrel of oil would cost in 2010 $41.88. So looking at this second example, it says if the inflation rate in Canada this year is 2.35%, calculate the likely cost of a 450 Canadian dollar laptop computer 1 year ago and in 4 years' time. Okay, so I'm going to enter what I know. I know that the price, the percent is 2.35. My present value being 450 Canadian dollars, entered as a negative. Future value is what we're solving for. And if it's 1 year ago, I'm going to enter -1, 1 year before where we are now. I go to my future value, I hit alpha solve, and it tells me it'd be $439.67. Now, what about the price in 4 years' time? Well, my present value is still 450, but now I want to know 4 years after the present day. So I put in a 4, I go back to my future value, I press alpha solve, and it tells me 493 Canadian dollars and 81 cents. And I should actually mention that the way that I did part A is not the only way to do it. I could have also made my future value equal to 450 and made my number of years 1 and then set solved for my present value. And that could have been what I solved for. And that would have, with all the other parts being the same, the interest being 2.35, that would have also given me the same answer as setting my present value to 450 and using n as -1. So it's kind of just a preference thing. It's whatever makes the most sense to you. Okay, so then not only is there inflation, so the price of goods become more expensive for the same good, but there's also depreciation, which is things that have value, they lose their value over time. So what kind of things experience depreciation? Well, the biggest thing that we can talk about is cars, right? The second we drive a car off the lot, it's already worth less than it was when it was on the lot. And every year that goes by, our car is losing value because even if it's not being driven, but especially if it's been driven, we're adding miles, and the car is just older, so it's, not worth as much. Again, we can use the compound interest formula for this too, but the only difference is, since the value is decreasing, right, the value, the worth is decreasing, the R value has to be negative. So if we look at this situation, Rena buys a new bicycle for $25,000 INR. She knows that the value of bicycles is going to depreciate by 6% each year. What will her bicycle be worth in 8 years' time? Okay, so we're going to enter what we know. Right now, the present value of her bicycle is 25,000. So I'm going to enter it as a negative 25,000. She knows that the value of the bike is going to depreciate by 6% each year. So my percent is not going to be positive 6%, but it's going to be negative 6%. What will her bicycle be worth in 8 years' time? Okay, so my n is going to be 8. And I want to solve for my future value. Notice we're not touching the compounding periods per year for inflation or depreciation. So my future value, alpha solve, tells me that in 8 years' time, it's going to be worth only 15,239.22 INR. Okay, so Jose runs a printing business in Chile. He decides to buy a new printing press at a cost of 45,000 pesos. So that's his current value, and I'm entering it as a negative. The value of the press depreciates at a rate of 10% each year. So the interest rate is going to be a negative 10% because it's depreciating. How long will it take before the press is worth half the amount that Jose paid for it? So if the present value is 45,000, half of that value, the future value, would be 22,500. Okay, so negative 45,000, half of that would be 22,500. Again, one of them is going to be negative, one of them is going to be positive. Okay, it wants to know how long it will take before the press is worth half. So how long means that we're solving for n. So I'm going to go up to n, press alpha, enter, and it tells me that it's going to take 6.58 years. Now things can depreciate over part of a year. It's not like 1 year it's worth 45,000, and the next, the whole first year it's worth 45,000 until the next year when all of a sudden it drops. No, it's constantly depreciating, even in the middle of a year. So our final answer would be, and we would include the decimal, would be 6.58 years. If you want some problems to practice, you can look at example 4.5. All of those problems would give you some good practice. Also, don't forget, as I wrote on your pink sheet, if you're looking for just like a cumulative way to practice for this quiz, you can look at these problems. Page 136, questions 1 through 4. Page 137, questions 8 and question 1. And page 139, questions 4 and 5. And those problems will give you a nice, good cumulative review for the quiz coming up.